future look like? This question is at the core of countless pieces of media, specifically the cyberpunk genre. These films contemplate, through a dystopian lens, how a technologically advanced future might work. But if you've seen any cyberpunk films, you probably know that there's another common element in the genre, the Asian influences. Most of the most popular cyberpunk films, shows, or video games take heavy influence from Asian, particularly East Asian, architecture, language, culture, and more. In fact, this concept is common enough that the name Techno-Orientalism, or sometimes cyber-Orientalism, has been made for it. But before I dive into this trope, let's talk about how it relates to Orientalism as a whole. Orientalism can be summed up pretty well by French artist Jean-Léon Gérôme's 1879 painting, The Snake Charmer. The image embodies Western misguided ideas of the Orient, going as far as to include writings on the wall that are in fact utter gibberish. So, Orientalism. The idea was coined by Edward Said in 1978 as a way of referring to the general othering of Middle Eastern, Asian, and North African societies, whereas the Occident, the word referring to Western societies, was represented as normal and standard. The Orient was a backwards deviation from the norm. In his then controversial book Orientalism, Said talks about how within writing, those from the Occident were portrayed as heroes and those from the Orient as inferior villains.
And he'd lead hundreds of millions of men to sweep the world. And that, my friend, is what you have got to prevent.
It's worth mentioning here that Orientalism can refer to the othering of a variety of places, but in this video I'm talking specifically about Asia, and usually more specifically about East Asia. Orientalist imagery is still prevalent in pop culture, from the use of ninja costumes on Halloween to kimonos on stage. Though there is debate as to whether these acts are racist in and of themselves, they are almost always fantastical and inaccurate. As Pedro Jacobelli writes about a film with aspects of Orientalism, it tells us more about the American and the American's image of this culture rather than the people of that culture. Best-selling author Chloe Gong observes in her article on the subject that these portrayals can seem like a good thing, like appreciation even, until you remember that people's understanding of East Asian cultures is often made up. Just like in The Snake Charmer, in art, our vision of the so-called Orient tends to be pretty warped. Techno-Orientalism differs a bit from Edward Said's definition of Orientalism. Instead of seeing Asia as just backwards and uncivilized, Techno-Orientalism represents Asia as so technologically advanced that it has no humanity. Asian people can still be framed as intellectually inferior, but the key distinction is that they're now also hyper-technological, making them supposedly emotionless and inhuman. In their book Techno-Orientalism, Imagining Asia in Speculative Fiction, History, and Media, David S. Rowe, Betsy Huang, and Greta A. Neo write that this presents a juxtaposition of cultural retrograde with technical hyper-advancement. The message of Techno-Orientalism is actually a little contradictory, since it portrays Asian people as both terrifyingly intelligent as well as uncivilized and culturally behind. Techno-Orientalism means using Asian, more specifically East Asian, cultures as a signifier of the future. This isn't just any future, though, it's cyberpunk, thus a dystopian future. These films tend to have a white guy battling against a corrupt system or corporation in a city full of indicators of East Asian influence. Techno-Orientalism also includes the portrayal of Asian characters as robotic and emotionless, through the use of characters like stereotypically Asian-coded robots, subservient female cyborgs, and more. So, Techno-Orientalism can result in appropriation by centering white guys in otherwise East Asian stories, xenophobia by portraying Asian advancements as dystopian, and dehumanization by portraying Asian characters as robotic or disposable bodies. Countries outside of Asia, particularly the US, know a long history of unjustified fear of the other that Asia presents. Some of the many instances include the original Orientalism Said critiqued, to the Yellow Peril that spanned the 19th and the 20th century, to the Japan Panic of the late 20th century. As companies like Sony or Nintendo boomed in the 80s, the fear elicited by economic and technological prosperity in East Asia demonstrated a phenomenon that still exists today. That perhaps subconsciously, science, tech, and progress are viewed as only good in the hands of the Western world, whereas advances in Asia are scary or dangerous.
His aim, world domination by means of the most deadly substance known to modern science.
As intersectional.abc writes on TikTok, people can't say East Asia is backwards, so instead now they paint them as soulless robots made to build. Along with plain racism, part of this fear also stems from worries about the US losing dominance. The city in Blade Runner, for example, is director Ridley Scott's vision of a futuristic LA, fundamentally altered by Asian companies, and this aligns well with when the film was made, at a time when Yellow Peril and East Asian advancement was at a high. The characters in these films also have roots in the Orientalism I mentioned earlier. Senator John F. Miller campaigned for the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 by claiming that Chinese immigrants were a danger because they were machine-like with muscles of iron. 20th century pamphlets from the American Federation of Labor, fearing economic replacement, wrote that whatever business or trade Chinese laborers enter is doomed for the white laborers, as competition is simply impossible. The characterization of Asian people as machine-like and subhuman is exactly what created later Techno-Orientalist stereotypes. And even if these cyborgs or robots aren't actually played by Asian actors, they often instead are given stereotypical symbols of Asianness.
I realized, oh, he's not Asian. He's a construct of Asianness. He's this manufactured idea of Asianness.
And not only are these characters seen as emotionless and mechanized, they're also often sexualized.
I'm very tired.
Oh, don't be shy now. You Chinese are goers, everyone knows.
I could probably make a whole nother video on this, but it's worth talking about that they exist to serve the white protagonist, simultaneously perpetuating stereotypes of Asian people generally as inhuman, and Asian women as silent and submissive. Kyoko from Ex Machina, for example, literally cannot speak, unlike her white counterpart, and exists entirely to serve the domestic and sexual desires of a white guy.
Our lives are not our own.
The overall lack of Asian characters also tends to be an issue. Asian people supposedly shaped these cities, and yet usually they're nowhere to be found in the actual narrative. The general message of these movies is sometimes larger concerns about society and corporations, but this can easily get lost since it's easier and simpler to frame corporate threats as a result of East Asian innovation and technological progress. George Yang writes in Wired that these films can frame injustice in nationalist terms as opposed to class-based ones, like good, honest American companies versus devious Asian ones, rather than international capitalists versus international workers. Asia and its supposedly terrifying and unknown nature serves as an outlet for what might otherwise be more nuanced anxieties about the future. Of course, the mere idea of setting the future in an East Asian-looking city isn't inherently racist or xenophobic. Even Orientalism itself has been argued to not exactly be racist and more than anything be a result of willful ignorance. But it holds true that Orientalism can lead to, and has historically led to, racist acts. I know the writers of these films largely aren't making them with malicious intent. Denis Villeneuve, Ridley Scott, and Alex Garland, the directors of some of the most relevant cyberpunk films here, of course didn't create their films with the intent of perpetuating any xenophobic stereotypes, and their clunky portrayals of race don't detract from some of their powerful messages. And a bleak East Asian-inspired future isn't an inherently bad part of a film. What's important is that these films don't rob Asian characters of their humanity, or turn all of Asia into an evil, unfeeling empire set on destroying Western society. In Big Hero 6, the city of San Francisco clearly shows a world in which Japanese influence has dominated the architecture and culture of what used to be San Francisco. But not only does this portrayal stay away from any xenophobic stereotypes, it's also featured within a film that centers well-developed Asian characters. There's lots of other examples of cyberpunk films that don't rely on techno-orientalism. Though 2017's Ghost in the Shell was infamously poorly done, the earlier 1995 animation has the same cyberpunk themes through the eyes of an actual Japanese protagonist. There may be an array of films that employ the trope of techno-orientalism, but there are also lots that turn it on its head. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. I'm sorry if I called your favorite film Techno-Orientalist at some point, but keep in mind that I really love many of these films. It's just all the more reason to fully dissect them. Thanks for watching.